Strange things are happening in the Arctic around Svalbard. It's home to the only Russian town on NATO territory. Svalbard is a group of Norwegian Arctic islands in the middle of nowhere. Around 300 polar bears and 3,000 people from all over the world live here. A unique agreement has made Svalbard international and kept it peaceful. But now, things are changing in the Arctic. There's a face-off between Russia and NATO. So could Svalbard become Putin's Greenland? And can NATO catch up to Russia in the Arctic? To find out, let's venture into the cold. Svalbard means cold shore in Old Norse. Norwegians used to consider it a sort of no man's land. 60% of it is covered by ice. Life on Svalbard is tough. And there's always the threat of having to hide from a polar bear here. Which means people leave their doors and cars unlocked in case you have to escape.
It's extremely cold and extremely dark and extremely difficult environment to live in.
This is Jennifer Spence. She has decades of experience researching in the Arctic and has been to Svalbard.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I was there in the summer, so it was 24 hours of daylight instead of 24 hours of darkness.
Svalbard is here, in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. Longyearbyen is the main town on Svalbard, and one of the world's northernmost settlements. There's also Barentsburg. It's known as Russian and is a coal mining town. We'll get to why that makes things tense. Svalbard is between mainland Norway and the North Pole. It's Norwegian territory, which means it's also NATO territory. It's pretty much between Greenland to its west and Russia's Arctic coast to its east. You might have heard of Spitsbergen. That's Svalbard's biggest island. It has long attracted bold researchers exploring the Arctic and the North Pole. For a couple of centuries, Svalbard kind of belonged to everyone and to no one. But when mining got popular, land needed to be officially distributed and different countries wanted access. Workers demanded rights. So after World War I, Svalbard got a unique treaty to regulate its status. The Svalbard Treaty made the archipelago Norwegian, but open to others. It was also supposed to keep it peaceful.
Based on the Svalbard Treaty, there isn't supposed to be any military activity there.
Article 9 states Svalbard may never be used for warlike purposes. What that means is up for debate today. But in any case, no country has a military base here. Citizens from countries that had signed the treaty have access to the islands. Initially, there were 9 signatory countries. Now, there are over 40. Countries like the United States, China, France, even North Korea and Afghanistan, and also Russia. If your country signed the treaty, you can easily become a resident here, and Svalbard is visa-free. Along with tourism and mining, there's been a focus on climate research and marine biology here.
It's uniquely positioned from a research perspective.
In places like this, the research station in Ny-Ålesund has always attracted scientific pioneers. Today, 10 countries have permanent research infrastructure in the settlement. Scientists from around the world work side by side here. A Norwegian satellite station on Svalbard provides scientific data, SvalSat. It operates more antennas than any other commercial station in the world. Its location is ideal for downloading data from satellites orbiting the Earth from pole to pole. SvalSat is a key bit of global communications infrastructure, and that makes the satellite station an attractive target for hybrid attacks. NATO has accused Russia of attacks on strategic infrastructure like this in the past.
If you want to sort of nudge and disrupt, you're going to do that through a hybrid approach versus through more traditional sort of military approaches, because otherwise you're violating the treaty.
Because of the Russian legal presence on the Svalbard archipelago, there are certainly opportunities for Russia to exploit the situation.
This is Katarzyna Zysk. She's a specialist on Russian hybrid warfare and the Arctic at a university of the Norwegian Armed Forces. Her recent research focused on Svalbard.
There is just broadly more awareness how also strategically important these islands are. And we've seen also a quite concerning evolution in the behavior of the Russian population on the islands.
Like this Victory Day parade. It's in Barentsburg, the Russian town on Svalbard we mentioned. Victory Day is a huge holiday in Russia. It commemorates the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. This parade in Barentsburg was held after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russian nationalism right on NATO territory. In the 1930s, Barentsburg became a Soviet coal mining settlement. The Soviet coal mining company is a Russian state-owned company today, and it's still the employer for most of the people living in Barentsburg. It gives them a reason to stay here. The population is about 350 people, mostly Russians.
There is no doubt that Russia has subsidized the presence there. It's not been economically profitable. So there is a different objective behind the Russian presence, and the main objective is to maintain foothold.
This foothold is not a military presence, because the Svalbard Treaty bans that. To understand why Russia wants to keep this foothold, we need to look at what Russia has around Svalbard. To the south of it is Russia's Kola peninsula. It's home to a huge amount of Russian military infrastructure and has Russian nuclear submarines.
The world's largest accumulation of nuclear weapons are on the Kola peninsula, and also the largest share of Russian strategic submarines that carry the sea-launched ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles. So this is an extremely important part of the Russian military strategy, defense, and also with offensive capabilities as well.
And Russia's Franz Josef Land is to the east of Svalbard. It hosts Nagurskoye Air Base. This isn't a movie set. It's one of around 50 former Soviet military facilities Russia reactivated in the Arctic since 2014 to increase its capabilities here. You can see on satellite images of the base that the runway there was extended. Russia says it can now accommodate any aircraft all year long, including Russian heavy bombers. Russian military planning aims to control and also defend this area in case of a conflict. That strategy is called Bastion defense. And Svalbard, which is not supposed to be used for warlike purposes, is smack in the middle of it.
It's located in the perimeter of the so-called Russian Bastion defense, which is basically the Russian concept of protecting its strategic submarines and various assets on the Kola peninsula. So Svalbard lays within that operation area, the defense perimeter.
Russia has been accusing Norway of militarizing Svalbard. Russia criticizes visits by Norwegian Navy and Coast Guard ships as violations of the Svalbard Treaty.
So there are these accusations of Russia as the victim of Norwegian and NATO policies in the region. This feeds into this sort of narrative of Russia as this besieged fortress sort of mentality, the victim mentality, a victim narrative.
That's a narrative Russia has used to justify the war in Ukraine as well. And the connection goes beyond rhetoric. Russia has been using an airbase on the Kola Peninsula in the Arctic to conduct cruise missile strikes like these on Ukraine.
The tensions between Russia and NATO, they definitely spill over also to Svalbard.
Look at this. These are locations of airspace restrictions, likely indicating military exercises before the full-scale invasion. And this is what they look like since 2022. They're much closer to Svalbard.
There is no doubt that the Russian war in Ukraine is the priority number one for the Kremlin. And we've seen that also playing out in the Arctic. However, Russia has maintained attention and focus on the region as well.
And Russia likes to show off its Arctic capabilities. Like these submarines during an Arctic expedition. Or these paratroopers jumping at a staggering 10,000 meters into freezing Arctic weather to test new equipment. Russian mini-submarines carried out this mission almost 20 years ago to stake a claim on part of the Arctic Ocean's seabed near the North Pole.
Мы сделаем все для того, чтобы укреплять глобальное лидерство России в Арктике. Роль и значение Арктики и для России, да и для всего мира растет.
Unfortunately, that growing importance is also because of this: climate change. You can see it on these NASA images of the Arctic ice. By the way, Svalbard is the fastest warming place on Earth.
The sea ice is receding. There's growing interest in the region for its potential economically, for its potential for shipping routes.
Since 2013, there's been around a 40% increase in the number of ships in the Arctic, and there's been a huge increase in cargo ships. Let's change the way we're looking at the map to see why. Russia is here, the US is here, and Svalbard is here. The northern sea route, which runs along the Russian coast, is particularly interesting for Russia. It's a shortcut for moving goods between Europe and Asia.
Russia is an Arctic nation. And if you look at a map from the top of the world, Russia is either between 40 and 50% of the Arctic, depending on how you measure it.
And the melting sea ice isn't just revealing economic opportunities. If we stay in this view of the map, we can see why it's a geopolitical hotspot in Russia-NATO tensions.
The Arctic is actually an ocean surrounded by countries.
And Russia and the US, two nuclear powers, are facing each other across the Arctic Ocean. During the Cold War, both the US and the Soviet Union used submarines to try to get the upper hand.
With deadlock on land, the nuclear nations launched atomic submarines.
Particularly here, the GIUK gap. Russian forces consider this their operational area, as we saw, and Russia has nuclear submarines on its coast. They would need to pass these narrow waterways to enter the Atlantic Ocean, closer to US shores. So you can see why this is a key point for NATO and US military strategy. That might explain Donald Trump's obsession with Greenland.
All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland.
I think there are parallels between Greenland and the Svalbard situation. Greenland strategically positioned to be a place of defense for NATO and for the United States.
Whereas Svalbard, or rather the waters around it, are a strategic gateway for Russia. We'll look at whether those parallels hold up later. For now, let's come back to what the melting ice means for Russia.
From an economic perspective, there are certainly some benefits that Russia acknowledges. But from a security perspective, there is no doubt that this is a threat. This is a vast area that has been naturally protected by ice, which is opening for a foreign military presence, including intelligence activities, including military presence. And this is something that Russia has been addressing.
By investing in bases like this in the Arctic. And in these icebreakers. That's key in the Arctic.
Russia is the biggest nation in the world in terms of number and strength of its icebreakers, including nuclear-powered icebreakers.
Because the thing about the melting ice is, it's not totally gone.
Ice-free does not actually mean ice-free all the time. Ultimately, in many cases, you literally, like ships can't navigate for any purpose without the support of icebreakers.
I would argue that Russia has a head start, certainly because of that.
Russia has around 40 polar icebreakers. The US, for example, has 3. Now NATO is pushing to catch up.
In the face of Russia's increased military activity and China's growing interest in the high north, it was crucial that we do more.
NATO has launched a series of exercises and missions in the Arctic. And
a lot of the exercises we're seeing will likely have scenarios that involved Svalbard.
And something else has shifted for NATO around Svalbard. Finland and Sweden have become NATO members since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now all the Arctic nations, apart from Russia, are NATO states.
Having Sweden and Finland, it creates a situation where there's really no question anymore that NATO has an important role to play.
And Finland is also a top expert when it comes to building icebreakers. The US, Canada, and Finland formed the icebreaker collaboration effort, known as the Ice Pact, to build more.
You're going to be teaching us about the icebreaker business.
But that's going to take time in the Arctic. It's a very difficult environment to function in. And so really right now, what NATO needs to be focusing on is building its understanding, its domain awareness, and its capacity to actually work and function in the region. So they're going to have to rely very heavily on countries like Norway and Finland.
Norway has labeled itself NATO's ears and eyes in the north. And it's been very clear about its stance on Svalbard. It's Norwegian territory. So if there was a Russian attack, that could be considered an attack on all NATO members. It could activate NATO's collective defense clause.
Not even Russia questions that.
But Russia's behavior has created a sense of insecurity around the archipelago. Exercises like those paratroopers training to land on an Arctic island could be seen as a direct threat to take over Svalbard.
I think that there's genuinely a concern. Russia's invasion of Ukraine also, I think, gives Norway and the NATO countries pause that traditional approaches to recognition of sovereignty and the rule of law is at risk.
And with Trump's recent threats to take Greenland, the idea of Putin taking Svalbard doesn't seem so far-fetched.
The Russian government might ultimately say, well, what works for the United States and Greenland can also be a justification for something similar that we might see Russia take that approach in Svalbard.
In the current situation, I don't think that Russia has an interest of taking Svalbard, for instance. The primary interest is to monitor the situation, to maintain foothold and make sure that Svalbard is not used for military purposes, in particular by NATO.
Svalbard is at the center of rising Arctic tensions and temperatures.
I genuinely believe research and scientific cooperation in the Arctic is still absolutely critical. And I think it would be a huge loss because of the geopolitical tensions, we saw those things fall away. We need to dial down the temperature.
To keep Svalbard the unique and peaceful place it was meant to be.